Hello, my name is Luis Ramirez, and today we'll be discussing inmate classifications and just what it is and what it does in corrections. So explaining inmate classifications, it's pretty simple. It's just like the grouping of like inmates in specific classes to basically just determine how dangerous they are. Um, there's a lot of things that go into deciding that, like if they're more prone to escape, or if they're violent and they seem like they can cause harm to others or themselves. The amount of time that they're there for, if they're there for a long time, that can make it to where they're placed higher on a classification scale because they're probably there for a really dangerous crime. Also, with just their behavior in general, so this happens at the beginning, right? Whenever, a unit receives an inmate, they'll be given a classification. And most of the time, it's going to just be off of the crime that they committed and, their sentence length. Those two will probably be just the only things that they take in consideration at the time while receiving them at first. And, classifications aren't permanent. So it's, if you get, classified at the beginning, it won't stick with you the entire time that you're in a prison. So that's whenever, it comes to the whole escape risk and the violence and just the behavior. You can get put higher or lower on the inmate classification scale in like situations if an inmate was to get a disciplinary case because they didn't comply with orders or they were out of place and they were written up for that by an officer. They can be placed on a higher scale for just showing they're not cooperative, and they're an inmate that just gets into trouble when they're already in a prison that they're there because they caused trouble. So cases will make it to where a classification can be changed, as well as just time served without doing much and being cooperative will get you changed to a less violent classification. So with the levels, when it comes to classification, the custody levels, it kind of comes like all the way from minimum to maximum. But to explain it better, I will go with how TDCJ does it, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. They have a custody level that they have it as G1 through G5, which the G stands for general population, and G1s are going to be that minimum, security level, and the G5s will be more on that kind of high medium right there at maximum, because some inmates will be placed on restrictive housing, which is kind of like the worst of the worst inmates, and they're not put on a general population scale, so they're already out of the whole G1 through G5. You know, inmates like that, they're kind of in cells for probably about 24 hours of the day. The only time that they're able to leave would be to take showers. Food is brought to their cell block and given to them in their cells. Unlike other inmates, when the G1s and all the way to the G5s that hold the general populations, those inmates will be able to be out in the day room and have access to other stuff that those inmates that are there in restrictive housing wouldn't get. So the inmates that are general population are able to go to chow, are able to get rec time with inmates that are not on that G1 and G5 scale. If I'm correct, it's on a whole, like another little set. I'm pretty sure it's like A1, A2, and A3. Unsure what the A stands for, and I'm not sure if I was able to find anything online about that. I think that's a whole unit classification type of thing where it's kind of just like on each separate unit. They have like a different little classification that they'll use for inmates that are on restrictive housing. But in most of TDCJ prisons, nor probably all of them, they do have that G1 to G5 little general population classification. So why classification matters? It's mostly just to maintain safety, really, and just so we have kind of like a little quick rundown of what an inmate is capable of just based off of his classification. So it allows officers to make correct judgments in situations depending on what the inmate, is with it when it comes to classification. Challenges when it comes to classification can probably just be the whole bias part of it when it comes to like misclassification, and when maybe somebody classifies an inmate when they first get in there, or how again it's not permanent when they first are received at a unit. If an officer writes a case on an inmate that is untrue, it can cause an inmate to get a higher classification, and that's the challenge. It's not a perfect system per se, and not every officer is 100% committed to the job, I would say. So with that unperfect little world, some inmates can be done wrong and be placed on a higher classification when they're not in fact dangerous at all. As well as with classification, it causes one to be able to be in a specific cell block. If there's a lot of people that are on the same custody level or the same classification level, there can be overcrowding in cell blocks. There could be probably everybody, in a cell. There's maxed, there's 2 people in each cell, and you can't place another inmate in there. So if those, blocks that are meant for nonviolent offenders get filled up too quickly, we don't want to put those extra nonviolent offenders in areas where there's violent ones, because there's space open there, right? So with the whole overcrowding, that could be a situation that can affect classification. As well as classification can limit the access to an inmate receiving education or being able to work a job in the prison. And that can just be unfortunate for inmates that do want access to those things. So yeah, with classification, it's able to allow access to, specific programs that the unit offers to inmates. So if you're on a lower classification, you're able to, receive education, you're able to work a job, you're able to go to church, but for other inmates that just have a higher, classification, they're not open to those things because it's shown that they're not able to handle that. They're not composed enough because of their custody level. I feel as if that's a good rundown on classifications when it comes to corrections. So thank you for listening in, and y'all have a good one.